What is up, you guys? Dualry here, and welcome back to a new video. So you saw the title, you saw the thumbnail. In this video I'm going to be reacting to the Linux challenge part 2. Now I know I came a little bit late to this, and the reason is I had a lot of things to do, so I just didn't have time to react to this video as quickly as I could. But in my opinion, it doesn't matter, so we're going to be reacting to this video. Now I watched this video, so I'm going to watch it again and I'm going to give you my honest thoughts because I have a lot to say about this video. And yeah, with that being said, let's get into it.
The Linux Challenge 2026 edition was supposed to be a 3-part series.
The setup, a task-off challenge episode testing day-to-day usability, and a conclusion.
But then the first week was full of so many unexpected highs and lows.
We knew there had to be a video, especially after the Linux community exploded after I picked Pop! OS again.
Alright, so I think using Pop! OS was just not a good idea, simply because of the new Cosmic beta release, which it's still in beta. I could be wrong, but basically the developers of Pop! OS are still developing Pop! OS, and Cosmic is still in beta. So using it at the time was just not a good idea because we already saw one of the problems that Linus had when he used Pop! OS and the Cosmic desktop. So I'm curious to see what distro is going to use and whether he ran into similar problems. But let's continue.
And while Luke and I seem to have been praised for our choices, I can tell you guys firsthand that it has not been a smooth ride for me.
Meanwhile, things were going so great for me, I decided to dip my toes even further, attempting some more complex tasks that I didn't expect to go super well, just to see what would happen.
And I ended up trying some other distros which addressed some of my issues with Pop! OS, but also ended up being frustrating in their own ways.
But what is even more frustrating is that they aren't letting me be the one.
It's a segue to our sponsor.
Okay, so I'm going to skip this part and we're going to start here.
I feel like I've got to start this.
Hold on. Okay.
I feel like I've got to start this by explaining my brain-dead choice of Pop! OS. It was amazing how many people got angry at me for picking the same distro that screwed me over last time. But
Yeah, I remember he tried Manjaro in one of his videos. I can't remember if he ran, I think he didn't run into an issue because at the time when he used Pop! OS, the mistake he made, which is not a mistake, but it's more on, on the developer's end, he wanted to install Steam and then Steam could not be installed. And then he basically, I think he types up the terminal and then it showed a warning, but Linus didn't read it, which completely knocked his desktop environment. So this time when he used Pop! OS, as we have already seen, he didn't run into any issues other than like just usability issues because Cosmic is in beta, which is not a good idea to use if it's in beta, and Pop! OS in general. But let's continue.
you guys remember, I actually used Manjaro last time after I was assured that the bug that I encountered when I was setting up Pop!
Yeah, so this is why he used Manjaro because of that one terrible experience he had with Pop! OS where he just nuked his desktop environment. And if I remember correctly, I think he had an okay experience with Manjaro, which is good enough.
Pop! OS was a one-time fluke, and then I got piled on for being so quick to abandon it. So this is me putting aside my past experience after seeing so many people, listicles, and chatbots that still recommend it. That willing...
Yeah, there's a reason why I think a lot of Linux YouTubers often talk about listicles. They're just not good because one, they're not up to date, and two, they recommend Linux distributions that are very niche, and for beginners to get into those distributions might not be a good idea because obviously they're going to say, oh, Linux is terrible, I couldn't get a game to work, blah 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 blah, and then they quit. So that's why listicles are always not a good idea.
To try again is a good thing for Linux. I mean, if everybody failed after one bad experience, there would be no distros left to try. Nothing is perfect, and unfortunately, that goes especially for Pop! OS. System 76 has spent the last couple of years hard at work on a new desktop environment, Cosmic, and it's been a challenge.
Linus, Cosmic is basically in beta. Don't you know that it's not ready yet?
No, I didn't, for one thing.
Now, to be fair, even I didn't know. It's only when I did a bit of research while I reacted to my first Linux challenge, like the one I made a few months ago. I didn't realize the fact that Cosmic was in beta release. Because if we keep watching this video, it literally says download Pop! OS, which is LTS. It doesn't say anything about, oh, keep in mind, Cosmic is in beta release, so you may run into issues, right? It doesn't say anything. And that's kind of the unfortunate part when it comes to Pop! OS. So, yeah.
Where does it say that?
Exactly, it doesn't say that at all, even if you type beta. So for people who want to try Linux, especially if it's their first time, they think, oh, Pop! OS is good because, a person or a user told me to use it, and then they realize it's not a good experience, and they say, okay, I'm never going to use Linux again, basically.
The thing that I downloaded was called LTS, or long-term support. That's like the opposite of beta. I would have had to journey to a random blog post from back in September of 2025 to discover that Cosmic is now in public beta. Number two, maybe this is a hot take, but maybe if System 76, a commercial entity, not a random open source contributor, knows that it's not ready for prime time, instead of blaming me, we should probably blame the company that shipped it. And
No, I agree. If you take a look at something like Buzzite, one of the things I like about Buzzite, especially when it comes to installing a distribution, is it does give you a warning, especially for people who want to run this Steam Play. If you have an NVIDIA driver, it does show you a warning. So I wish most distros have that, so that the user knows that, oh, okay, maybe if I do this, it's not a good idea to use this distribution. I should use something else. So yeah.
what? Yeah, I could have come across some of the Linux YouTube channels that have highlighted these issues. But a key element of the Linux challenge is highlighting that unless you know to ask the question, is this distro's desktop environment in beta? It can be hard for new Penguin curious users to find the right answers. So as we keep going, it's important to think of the Linux challenge not as an attack on Linux, but as more of a pen test for how friendly it is to newbies.
My Bazite adventures started a bit better than Linus at first. But if you remember in part 1, I mounted my SMB share. I was shocked at how easy it was to find, because normally on Windows, I would have to type in the address bar and find it. Versus on Bazite, I just clicked on network and it found it right away.
So this is a mistake that unfortunately he made, because that's not actually mounting the drive. He just created a shortcut, which resulted in him not knowing which driver is the correct driver, as you explained further. So this is a mistake that I think some people are going to make, and they realize, oh, my bad, that's a shortcut.
But I didn't realize that that wasn't mounting it. That was just creating a shortcut. This means my read and write permissions were all over the place, and I couldn't save some files to my network drive if I clicked on that shortcut. To solve this, I had to do some Googling, and I found out that I needed to modify my fstab file to point the network location to the MNT folder on my drive.
Now, the issue where he ran into, as you explained, is since he created that shortcut folder, he has two fstabs, which he doesn't know which one is the correct drive. So again, this is an unfortunate mistake on his part.
So I did that, but then I noticed that I had two.
Yeah.
Both of which were still behaving like a shortcut. I tried at least a dozen different options in order to mount the share correctly, none of which ultimately succeeded. or should have even been necessary if you ask me. Opening context menus on icons, shortcuts, or applications is a great tool, and it seems like a big oversight on the Bazite team to not include a quick mount option that just works. Instead, I want to F-stab myself in the head.
Meanwhile, I was having a grand old time on Kashi, and since
I just find it very weird that Luke is like the only guy who has a good experience, while Linus always seems to have a terrible experience. I just find it weird, but let's continue.
more comfortable than the other two guys, I decided
Because honestly, there's nothing much we can say other than, okay, that's a good experience. We love that, but yeah.
to get a little bit daring. I uninstalled my entire Cinnamon desktop environment on purpose to see if I would run into any challenges. It took about 20 minutes max before I was up and running with KDE Plasma, and my only issue was that I had to clean up some small things left over from Cinnamon, like an additional sound icon that was in the bottom tray, because I had two sound icons and they could conflict and stuff, and that was honestly also really easy to do, so no big deal. As for my gaming adventures, my first real challenge in this Linux challenge was probably my own fault. I had read some stuff online saying that I could do it, but I think I was trying to be a little bit more optimistic than realistic. I had a Windows game drive previously that I just kind of left alone and tried to use on Linux, which means that it was formatted in NTFS. I just added it to my Steam library in Linux and tried to go. All my games showed up perfect and everything seemed fine at first. Some games even ran okay, but I started to notice some glitches, and even some games that I had freshly installed on that drive just wouldn't work. It would just, you click play and it just wouldn't launch sometimes. It turns out that while Linux can't...
Okay, now this is something that I want to talk about. This is a classic mistake some Linux beginners are going to make. Now, if you've been a subscriber to this channel, you know that I made a video called 10 mistakes Linux beginners make. I hope that's how I actually named the title of the video. But in that video, I talked about this particular mistake where Linux users, especially beginners who have NTFS drives, are going to have problems when they run Windows games. Now, this is where things get a bit interesting, because when I made that video, there were some comments, not all, but some comments of people saying, hey, I use Linux. I don't have this issue. I'm using NTFS. Others completely agreed with me and said, hey, bro, thank you. You saved me. I realized that my games were not working because I have an NTFS drive, and Wine and Proton don't like those drives. So I think this mistake, from what I've seen, it really depends on the game, because if this site says, hey, this game works, especially if they're using NTFS, and others say, well, I'm trying to run this game, it doesn't work, and they found out that they are using NTFS, then I would say it's situation dependent. It just really depends on the game you're playing. But still, it's a common mistake that a lot of Linux beginners are going to make, especially if they don't know that using NTFS may not work. Now, Linux can read NTFS, and most of your data in your storage is going to work fine. The only problem is Wine and Proton may not be able to read whatever games you have in that drive, and that's why you run into issues where he just said where games don't work. He had some graphical glitches or whatever it is, or the games just don't work. So it's like heavily situation dependent. It just depends. Yeah, so that's what I want to say.
Still use NTFS, and there's been some ongoing development to make it even smoother. Even since we started this challenge, I can say in my experience, it was kind of rough, especially when used with Proton. Proton doesn't seem to like it. So in my opinion, if you want to play games off of an NTFS drive, just don't, at least not right now.
My gaming experiences were mostly smooth, with two major exceptions though. One of which I'm actually gonna save for the conclusion because it's kind of a spicy one, so make sure you get subscribed for that. But the other was actually the first game that I tried to fully play on Linux. Poppy Playtime Chapter 5. I wanted to stream it, but I was getting no audio and no picture, which is not ideal for a stream. Oh no, are we not gonna be able to play? But then it suddenly just popped in and started working fine. I played it for a little while, and then the same thing happened again.
Look, all the friends are here. Isn't this amazing? Oh.
Well, it turns out that the pre-rendered cutscenes weren't working. Proton, which is the compatibility layer that allows non-native Linux titles to work on Linux, is missing proprietary licenses for H.264 and H.265 video codecs.
And this is something that I also want to talk about. This is why, in my opinion, Proton GE is sort of becoming the standard when it comes to running Windows games on Linux, because the truth is Proton isn't always up to date. Now, of course, there's Proton 11. I'm aware of that. We're going to get anti-sync. That's good, right? But Proton never used to be up to date when it comes to codecs or like certain fixes for games that don't work on Linux because of cutscenes or whatever issues. But yeah, Proton GE is always up to date, right? They always provide a Proton fix or just basic updates for DXVK and Vulkan. And I would say the fact that Proton GE is always up to date with some kind of fix is, in my opinion, sort of becoming the standard to run most Windows games, because I'm telling you, if you want to play a single player game, run Proton GE. In fact, run Proton first. If you run into issues like he's having, then use Proton GE and the game will work just fine. So yeah.
What was the solution? A community fork called Proton GE, which thankfully was in the Bazite store. That's a pretty simple fix, but it's also one that highlights how unrealistic some Linux evangelists can be about the experience. No, in many cases, it doesn't just work out of the box, and users who don't treat fixing their operating system as a hobby will be looking for someone to blame for this hassle. So is it Linux? Valve? Mob Entertainment? The user?
No, it's not Linux, it's not Steam, it's not Mob, and it's not the user. Neither of those are to blame.
Maybe all? Or, hear me out, none? It's easy to jump on the blame bandwagon and hate on some developers for not prioritizing Linux.
But the truth is, you can't blame Linux if it doesn't have a market share. Right now, I think it has 3% or 4%. But that's still a very low market share, to be very honest with you guys. So you cannot blame a minority of users who are using Linux. You cannot blame Linux and say, oh, I'm not going to play this game because the developers didn't bother. The thing is, if an operating system has a low market share, no developer is going to have the interest to fix an issue, especially if it's a game or a software. That's just not going to happen.
But ask yourself this, if 50% of your customers were on Windows and the other 48% are on Xbox and PlayStation, would you be stoked on hiring a fourth group of employees whose job it is to deal with the other 2%?
Definitely not.
Especially knowing that those 2% are not running one OS, but are probably running different flavors of OS? I mean, maybe you would. But it's more important to remember that just like the users, many companies don't treat fixing operating systems like a hobby. Okay, so then we blame Valve. No, obviously not. It's super cool that they have put so much support into Proton, but the fact that they've paid so much...
They've put more support in, not in just Proton, but they've put a lot of support in Steam, the Steam machine, which I hope it comes out. So they've put a lot of support, in my opinion.
Already is not a good argument that they should just obviously pay even more for these commercial video codecs. The point I'm trying to make here is that enjoying the Linux experience requires a no-blame mindset. Some stuff's gonna work, and some stuff won't. It's not anybody's fault. Everyone is doing their best.
So with that in mind, throw out what I said earlier, because I'm not mad at System 76. In fact, I left Pop! OS on my main desktop just for the lulz, and it mostly worked for most things. With that said, when it came time to install Linux on my other systems, I did opt for something different, starting with Bazite on my home theater PC. It's just
Okay, that's good. But this is where he says the curse is.
too bad the Linux curse followed me there as well. Bazite
Yeah, so let's see what actually happened here.
has different versions of their installer, depending on the brand of your GPU and whether or not you want the SteamOS full screen experience. Well, I've got an NVIDIA GPU, and yeah, I want that experience. That's kind of the point of it on a home theater PC. So I picked this one. And let's put it this way. The Bazite team feels that I should have known the one.
Okay, so let's see here. So as you can see, it literally says here, Steam Gaming Mode support is available for your hardware in beta, but multiple known issues exist in these builds. Please note that the majority of bugs cannot be fixed except by your GPU manufacturer. So this means using NVIDIA, since he was using NVIDIA to try to run Steam Gaming Mode. Unfortunately, as you saw, let me go back a little bit.
And
He was having these scramble or graphical glitches, which is unfortunate.
let's put it this way. The Bazite team feels that I should have known the one that I selected would result in a completely unusable experience.
Which I think he should, because if he clicked this part where it says, do you want Steam Gaming Mode, then he should have read this and said, oh, okay, then using NVIDIA is not a good idea. Then he would have swapped his NVIDIA GPU with AMD, and none of this would have happened. So that's all I'm going to say for this part.
But to me, that's actually not that obvious. Coming from the Windows, Google, normie world, where a stable...
Which is why, in my opinion, in fact, let me go back again. Which is why more Linux distributions should do something like this to let the Linux beginner know that doing certain things, if you have an NVIDIA hardware, or if you have, I don't know, some kind of quirky system, you will run into issues. So this is something I like about Bazite, and I think more Linux distributions should do this. That's just my opinion.
Result in a completely unusable experience. But to me, that's actually not that obvious. Coming from the Windows, Google, normie world, where a stable service like Gmail was labeled beta for 5 years, it's not that unreasonable to think that you can daily drive a beta and have a mostly functioning experience. In Linux, that's an expectation that needs to be completely thrown out the window. Here, beta seems to mean this is broken, and if you're not a developer, you should probably just download the LTS, which might also be beta.
Yeah, that's the unfortunate part when it comes to Linux and other stuff. So, like the way he described it, beta in Linux means, hey, you run into this issue, and if you do, well, you have to expect it, right? Or just use something else. When you use Windows or any application, if it says it's in beta, you can expect it to work, but you aren't expecting bugs or issues. And unfortunately, that's one of the big differences when it comes to Linux. So, yeah.
Clearly we've got to reach a middle ground here, and Bazite seems to agree because they have updated the messaging on their site. Anyway, that happened later, so to get my system up and running, I ended up doing what many Linux people do and switching to a Radeon card, which was completely painless.
Why run Bazite when I could just run SteamOS on the Steam machine that we built on this channel like a couple months ago? I can't believe I forgot about this thing. I've been meaning to install it.
I actually ended up throwing SteamOS on my home theater PC.
Nice. Okay, is it a bit of a hack to just switch out your hardware? Yes but also no, because a lot of Linux gamers would go out of their way to choose compatible hardware in the first place. So I'm pretending I did that. First, I want to see how well this integrates with my system here. Let's hit power toggle for the PC. No way. Did Valve seriously bake in support for this old Microsoft IR receiver?
Which was child's play to get working, and it's been kind of awesome from the couch. Nothing further to report there. As for my laptop, I decided it was finally time to practice what I preach and go for good old-fashioned, trustworthy Ubuntu. So,
Now, what could possibly go wrong with using Ubuntu?
Kubuntu is actually Ubuntu, but with the KDE desktop environment, which I find quite comfortable to navigate. Sort of. I mean, first I have to get to the desktop, and day one was kind of terrible. After completing setup, it just black screened, and it sat there for hours. And I was like, come on, man, this is ridiculous.
Okay, now that's very weird. I've just saying because I have 2 laptops and I use all of them. Like all of them have Linux, and I've never had this issue. But again,
Then I came down in the morning and it was like Santa had visited because it was magically sitting at the login screen, and it's been downright pretty solid ever since, with a bit of a learning curve. For example, I did run into issues getting some applications to work due to downloading the wrong package. Debian packages, snap packages, and Flatpaks.
oh boy. So when it comes to package managers in Ubuntu, in my opinion, I would rather go with Flatpak, simply because Flatpak apps, while they are isolated in an environment, they are still less of a hassle. Snap packages are just awful. That's something that I'm going to say out loud. They're just awful. Add packages are okay. The only real downside when it comes to using Ubuntu is that you will not be up to date, or you will not always be up to date with certain packages, applications, drivers. So that's the only downside when it comes to Ubuntu, but you're still going to have a good experience with Ubuntu. It's just that I do not like the fact that they have snap packages, and I also don't like the fact that they are implementing AI, which nobody asked for. But let's continue.
Will all work on Kubuntu. But I figured, okay, well, Debian makes the most sense since Kubuntu is based on Debian. But then after I installed OBS, I realized I had no option to select the display that I wanted to screen capture. The solution? Use the Flatpak installer, apparently. Okay, but where? The top result, as far as I can tell, doesn't convey that it's a Flatpak. Oh, right.
I need to go back. Okay, yeah, this is where I say, oh, you didn't know, or it doesn't know if it's a Flatpak package.
The top result, as far as I can tell, doesn't convey that it's a Flatpak. Oh, right. I need to enable Flatpak search.
Which didn't work.
Except that wasn't the solution either, because Wayland, which Kubuntu uses as part of its desktop environment, has a privacy thing built in that no-likey screen capture. Now, it can be worked around, but threads like this one are a great example of how troubleshooting can often be a guess and check experience, because there are like 5 different...
Yeah, troubleshooting on Linux is very, or can be a very painful experience. That's why a lot of users do not want to troubleshoot for hours. And by that I mean like beginners do not want to troubleshoot for hours because Linux is complicated enough for them. That's something I understand. I'm not trying to, bash and say, oh, you don't want to troubleshoot. No, it can be a very in some cases can be a terrible experience, right? Especially if you're new. Nobody wants to troubleshoot for hours to get an application to work, especially if it's OBS. So
solution
yeah.
Here, and I actually can no longer remember which one worked. Of course, though, it's important to point out that every problem that we're having with Linux can also be a problem with Windows.
But the fact that Microslop is also bad doesn't mean that we shouldn't be honest about issues or like level of tinkering required with Linux. My laptop, for example, running Mint and a very simple use case of basically just loading a browser hasn't required any tinkering this whole time and hasn't really had any problems. My desktop running CachyOS, I've intentionally tried to put myself in harm's way and ran into some really complex scenarios that have been fun to diagnose and work through. But there are things that are quite simple on Windows and very easy to do that are more complicated on Linux. And that's okay, but try.
And this is something I actually agree. In fact, let's continue a little bit before I give my opinions.
To hide that fact in order to recruit more Windows users to join the community.
And this is the part that I want to emphasize on because he has a point. I think that it's okay if people do not want to use Linux. That's okay. To me, I generally don't care if you use Windows, Linux, Open. I think it's called OpenBSD. It doesn't matter what operating system you use, as long as you're comfortable using it. As long as you love your operating system, because believe me, there are people out there who say, "Oh, I'm going to stick to Windows 11," or "I'm going to stick to Windows." And then there are people who also say the same thing. I'm going to stick to Linux. I'm going to stick to Mac OS. As long as you're comfortable with the operating system, that's fine. And trying out Linux, trying out other operating systems, it can be a good and a bad experience, but at least you know that, hey, this is something that I'm not comfortable using. I'm just going to stick to an operating system I'm comfortable with. So yeah, I think forcing people to use Linux is not gonna work, because these are the same people who come from different operating systems, especially Windows, because I know Windows is not going anywhere. It's still the most dominant operating system, and I think a lot of Linux users agree. So if someone tries out Linux, specifically a Linux distribution, or they try out multiple Linux distributions, they say, Linux is not for me, that's fine. So, yeah.
I think does more harm than good, especially when they are, unfortunately, fairly often met with hostility from the community when they then run into these problems and are unequipped to deal with. I think.
And that's something that I also agree. Now, when it comes to the Linux community, all I can say is, yeah, there's some bad eggs in the Linux community. That's just the unfortunate reality. So when you are stuck with some issue you have, or you've been troubleshooting and you don't know what to do, and you ask in forums like Reddit, or you go to Discord, if you're met with hostility, all I can say is, yeah, I feel sorry for you. But that's the unfortunate part of the Linux community. It's always been toxic, not the whole Linux community, but a small minority. It's always been that way. And that's why I created this YouTube channel, and that's why I started making Linux content, because I'm someone who likes to help people, and I try my best to help people who comment on tutorials and other videos as much as I can, because I want to make sure that when people come into the Linux community, they don't come feeling like they are they are being treated with this hostility. Instead, they come with the feeling of, oh, someone is helping me, I should probably stick to this person, maybe you help me if I have some kind of issue. So yeah, that's why I created this channel. That's why I make tutorials and other videos, and I think that's what other Linux YouTubers are also doing, right? They want to make community where people can help each other when it comes to troubleshooting and all of that stuff. So yeah, that's something I agree.
There are some obviously extremely bright lights in the Linux community that bring a lot of hope and joy and fun to the whole experience of learning Linux, but there is a lot of negative communication on forums, on Reddit, elsewhere. It's very off-putting for new Linux community members, which we're going to be seeing a lot more of soon, to receive that type of energy. The biggest thing that didn't work for me was just software compatibility, but with some time and effort, I did manage to find either an alternative way to get the Windows native version working for my admittedly somewhat basic software suite.
I didn't. I use Adobe Premiere for editing, and one of the many fun ways that Adobe is kinda ass is that it just doesn't work on Linux. Now,
Which doesn't surprise me, and it doesn't surprise a lot of Linux users because Adobe will never support Linux. And that's something that we have to live with, but it doesn't bother Linux users at all.
Now, I tried messing around with Bottles a bit, which allows you to run Windows software on Linux. But that was obviously still a no-go, which then sent me looking for alternatives. DaVinci Resolve has a Linux build, though it's only officially supported on Rocky Linux of all things.
Which I find very, very weird. But, yeah.
Still, Rocky Linux is a lot closer to Bazite than Windows is, so maybe? And yeah, after 2 hours of trying, I got her up and running, but not the way I thought. See, I just tried installing it like a Windows application. Download and run. But Bazite, as I learned, is an immutable operating system.
And that's one of the biggest downsides to an immutable distribution. So basically, you can install applications, but the problem is, since it's an immutable distribution, most of the time, if you do a restart on your system, it's just not going to work, like the application you installed on Bazite. So yeah, it's unfortunate, but that's one of the downsides that a lot of Bazite users have to live with. Yeah, so
Similar to SteamOS. This means core operating system files and permissions are locked down in such a way that the user either can't screw them up, or they can, but then they'll reset themselves after a reboot.
yeah, exactly.
Unfortunately, this same lockdown applies to some software installers, which then means that they can't alter the files that they need to. The solution was for me to beat my head against a wall, until I found this 6-minute video about a simple command to run. Hey, software installed! But then I ran into the same problem as Poppy Playtime. Depending on the file that I was trying to play or export, it wouldn't work.
Yeah, and I'm going to be very honest with you guys. This is one of the reasons why I do not use my second computer for editing videos on Linux. That's why I have a Windows system, because editing videos on Linux, if I'm going to be very honest with you guys, is not ready. The fact that basic video codecs are locked out of Linux is one of the biggest downsides. Now, of course, yes, I know people are going to argue, say, but you can use something like Kden Live or other open source software, and you can, which he will explain, you can, but if you want to do fancy editing videos, it's still not worth it to use Linux. If you want to do basic video editing, which again, that's something he will say in this video, that's not a problem. So that's something I'm just going to say.
Frickin' curse you, video codecs. So I then tried Kden Live, which is fine for basic editing, but if I want to be a power user, it's just not.
Which is what he said, and that's something that I said. If you want to edit high quality videos, don't use Linux. That's my opinion. You are better off using Windows or Mac OS.
Quite there yet. And for stills, neither is GIMP. You know what? I'm going to be the one to say it. GIMP sucks.
With that said, I still want to emphasize the gratitude that
Well, to be fair, GIMP is still a very good software if you know how to use it correctly. Now, I haven't started using it. I use Canva, and I have a subscription for that, but that's what I use to edit my thumbnails, so yeah.
I feel, and you, Elijah, I know you feel it too, toward the open source community, whether it's applications or drivers or Linux in general. The fact that people are stepping up against the corporate overlords who are limiting our choices, feasting on our wallets, and then spying on us for good measure is amazing, and it's admirable. However, context matters. And when we're evaluating the experience of switching to Linux, we're doing so from a user perspective. And so we do have to point out things that might not be ideal. Just try to understand that it comes from a place of love and appreciation, not from a place of hate. Everybody involved in the Linux Challenge today is rooting for Linux to succeed. And it's actually been really exciting to see so many social media posts of people who have joined the challenge alongside us, even though we didn't ask anybody to. But as exciting as all of that is, part of succeeding in this is taking off the blinders and being honest about the areas where things need to improve. And it's actually been pretty cool to see that some of our observations are already resulting in clearer documentation that's going to help pave the path for future users. Now, I know we're releasing part 2, like, way past the 1 month point already. Elijah was busy fixing our environmental chamber, among other things, but we do still have more videos lined up for the series, and as you guys can see, even though we're past the month, there will be some surprises in the future parts. Part 3 is going to have us do some fun challenges.
So this is where I will end the video. Now, when I have time, I will get into part 3 and I'll give my opinions on part 3. But that's pretty much the Linux challenge. Now, as you saw, they had mixed experiences, which doesn't surprise me because video codecs is still a big issue. Playing games, it's not really an issue, but using an outdated Proton, like regular Proton, can lead to issues. So I think there's a lot that beginners or Linux beginners can learn from this video. So yeah, with that being said, that is pretty much it. I hope you guys enjoyed this reaction, and if you did, give it a thumbs up, and I'll see you in the next video. Take care.